it's always good to start off with a very wise gag. So I think
there's no better way to begin, really, is there?
This is Kino Kingdom, either 11 or 12, I forget. And we're now hosted on Podbean as well, so that means that you can sort of watch the still images of this on YouTube, or if you go to, I think it's themenwhotalk.podbean.com, you can sort of stream it when you're out running away from zombies. Or if you're in Apocalypse Z, you can stream it and listen to it on headphones as you're running around an industrial estate near some zombies. So I've got to go through today the Apocalypse Z, which I watched with Rupert, and there's a lot to say about that film. I watched The Call with Halle Berry, Cold Skin with an almost unrecognizable Ray Stevenson, The Fanatic with John Travolta, directed by Fred Durst, Triple Threat, which is a film with, I had to watch a Scott Adkins film because it's been far too long since I gazed into that man's eyes, gazed deep into his jaw. So that's got like Scott Adkins in and Tony Jaa and a few other key people. Then it was The Wolf Hour with Naomi Watts, and this is more of an overview because I came into this about halfway through the film, and I'm just going to say the title of the film and just say if you've heard about it. So it's called In Fabric.
I have heard of it, about it, and I do intend to watch it, so I'd be interested to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, it would be a totally spoiler-free like overview because I don't feel like I saw enough of the film to sort of judge it.
But, right, okay. It's Peter Strickland, isn't it? The one who did Barbarian Sound Studio.
One of my favourite films. So what have you got on the menu then, Rupert?
Well, I've got, like you, I have Apocalypse Z. I have... On your recommendation, I watched Behind the Mask, The Legend of Leslie Vernon.
Oh, nice.
The Departed, Dirty Dancing, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, 10 to Midnight.
Oh, is that the Charles Bronson film? Or was that David Soul? Oh, yeah.
K9.
The James Belushi film?
Yes. Ghost Rider.
Again, you can watch whatever films you want when we do this podcast. You don't have to stuff it. You can watch anything.
I know, it sounds like I'm just going through the 0%ers still, doesn't it? Ghost Rider and American Psycho 2.
Oh my goodness! Yeah, this is one that's it's quite an exciting list. So before we do start off with the one Apocalypse Z or Apocalypse Z, the one we first watched. I don't like doing this, but we've got a sponsorship to get out of the way. So I'm just going to sort of go through sort of...
You just sold our soul to the devil. But, we've got to do it to stay alive, haven't we?
This is the thing, money doesn't make itself. My grandfather used to say, Britt, money doesn't grow on trees. It's printed. It's printed in a mint. And then it's sort of distributed around the country. And I said, oh, okay. So I think you could have just said it doesn't grow in trees, really. I would have got the gist.
Yeah,
but
extrapolated from that, yeah.
This one, we're actually sponsored this podcast by Steven Seagal this week. So he did send me an audio file which I was just going to play, but it sounded like he kept falling asleep. So I just thought it would just be easier if I just read it out. So I'll get
no doubt he was in his office in Romania. So that makes sense.
Well, so what I'll do is I'll just, like I say, go through this, read it out, and then we can, get into get the corporate nonsense out of the way, straight into the meat of the podcast.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Steven Seagal. You'll know me from the films I've been in, such as Hard to Kill, Out for a Kill, Kill Switch, Driven to Kill, and Contract to Kill, to name but a few. Although I'd like to point out that I wasn't in Kill Bill, A Time to Kill, or Kill and Kill Again, although I would have liked to be in that one because the word kill is in the title not once but twice. I just want everyone to know that I'm available for film work, but with a few caveats. I have to wear an oversized, padded, full-length leather jacket for the duration of the film. The movie has to be filmed in either Bulgaria or Romania and have the word kill in the title, preferably 3 or 4 times. I spend at least 70% of my scenes sitting down, preferably on the phone, either to a younger martial artist who handles the action sequences, or an attractive woman in their 20s whom I will somehow seduce. Although I refuse any adult scenes of any kind, it has to be made unequivocally clear in the script that they fancy me. A stunt double will be used for any scenes that require movement that takes place beyond sea level or on an incline of any degree. The closest I get to a physical fight is ordering a Chinese takeaway, which I may or may not decide to fall asleep in the middle of. This is entirely at my discretion. My character must also have one of the following names: Dagger Whiplash, Jack Knife, Buck Stops, Eric Mahogany, Jake Machine, Finley Quasar, or Calvin Hammer. If you are a producer or director that can meet these demands, let's get together and work on a movie. Contact me at stevenseagal@lycos.com. P.S. I didn't star in A View to a Kill, but I did the fight choreography, so I kind of was in it in a way.
Brilliant. That is not only a heartfelt message, but also a fascinating insight into an artist's method, I think.
Yeah, and just the machinations of Hollywood, or rather Romanian filmmaking.
In a way, I'm surprised that Steven Seagal didn't show up in Apocalypse Z. Sorry, Z.
Yeah, but Uwe Ball did, so that's fine.
Thing is, it doesn't make any difference if you call it Z or Z, because the pun doesn't make any sense, because it was World War Z, as in World War 3, but this is, what, Apocalypse 3? No, it doesn't make any sense.
If this was the third in a trilogy of films, I'd have no interest in watching the third. In fact, let's just leap into Apocalypse Z, okay? Yes. So I'll let you do the description. But before you do the description and we talk about it, I want to make it very clear to everyone listening to this that this is a film that not only was awful, but also was kind of the stamp on the end of my tolerance for this kind of cynical filmmaking. This was the end of the line for me personally.
Yeah, it was not good then, I think that's what you're trying to say. So the story is that these mercenaries are sent to Romania, obviously, instantly sent to Romania, to plant a bomb and destroy a bunch of zombies. That's really it. So it's quite a simple plot. They find out they've been double-crossed when they get there by the US government. We'll come on to that in a bit. But they find out they've been double-crossed, and they basically have to get out of there and find another means of transport to get the hell out of there, because the clock's ticking and this huge bomb, nuclear bomb, I think, is going to go off and wipe out the whole place. So cue 90 minutes of them driving around an industrial estate.
It stars... I think his name is something like John Mitchell, but for a good 20 minutes of the film, I honestly thought that it was John Nettles from Bergerac, just like with a load of makeup on or something. The film is diabolical. The whole it's shot. There are scenes that are supposed to be filmed in, I guess, some sort of like American embassy, but everything is shot with like extreme close-ups. You can't see any of the surroundings, just the person's face is talking, and possibly like a hint of an American flag behind them, to make you think, oh, this is obviously in America and not in a warehouse in Romania.
And yet there isn't a single American person in it.
Apart from the sort of main hero, who we'll have to talk about that, because there's a sequence in that film that is so jarring that you think, why? So I've got no one to root for. Yeah, everyone in the film is supposed to be working for the American government, but they've all got like really pronounced British regional accents.
Yeah, so, or, German, or, well, the thing is, the President of the United States, literally phoning in his performance for about 3 minutes, is Uwe Ball. And it is the highlight of the movie, to be fair, because he comes on the screen and starts going in a really thick German accent. He's like, I'm here on my ranch in Texas. And then he starts talking about how they've got to sort out the zombie problem, because he needs to get back to
screwing whores. I could be screwing
whores
on my golf course. Yeah.
So staggering. But that was the best bit, because it was so ridiculous, and he managed to shoehorn a bit of like criticism of US into there.
Oh yeah.
So anyway, so it's really a kind of action zombie film, but it fails on every conceivable level of like script, performance, plot logic, tension. I'll start with something good to say about it. The practical effects when they have practical effects, they're pretty good.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
makeup's pretty good.
they're really nice, messy, sort of gnarly zombie effects, which were
Yeah.
quite cool.
Yeah, so it doesn't make any sense because they get there, they realize they've been double crossed. They're already just having really contrived arguments with each other for no apparent reason, even though they keep saying, "Oh, this is an easy job, get it done. All you have to do is go in and plant a bomb, get out. You get $5 million." So it's like, right, they would just be, regardless of whether they're mercenaries or not, they would be professional about it, and they'd just be like, right, let's get on with it. We don't have to talk to each other. But no, they're instantly having massive go at each other, especially these two, John Nettles and this other guy, and then the other guy gets killed really early on, and suddenly John Nettles is over by him, like crying and saying, "Oh, my brother, my friend," like weeping over his body. And it's like, hang about, you were literally just having a massive go at each other, and like you didn't have any interest in each other's welfare at all until this point. So anyway, go on.
And I was just going to say that everything about it, because usually when these films have bad scripts, you think at least be some decent action. But when the sort of zombies start ramping up, the main guy, who was actually American, or I think is like an ex-bodybuilder, they've turned up fully armored, like they've gone there in all the usual gear they would take to this sort of thing, and the main guy just like points his gun, a huge like assault rifle, at the oncoming zombie horde, and it clicks, and he just throws it away straight away, and is instantly reduced to his sidearm. And then when they catch up with John Nettles and the rest, including a woman there's a joke made in the film about her being Asian, but she's not. She's just got like flicks on her eyelashes, and she's like got
slight wingtips on her makeup.
Yeah. So it's bizarre. But then he meets up with John Nettles and he says, "How much ammo have we got?" And he's like, "I'm down to my sidearm." And then John Nettles holds up a shotgun and just says, "I've got 12 rounds for this piece of shit." And I thought, that's the gun you chose to bring. That's obviously one you're comfortable with. Yeah. And why have you thrown away your assault rifle? Just because it clicked once.
You came in a massive like military truck thing or jeep, presumably loads of room for like guns and ammo. So this is really your decision to make. But so yeah, awful action sequences. We better mention the weird backstory with the main character, the really boring main character. But right, it has this flashback near the start, right, where he appears to be in some kind of war situation, and he is definitely there, and this young girl is definitely there, a captive, like a war prisoner, but just a civilian or whatever. And she is attacked. You can't see who's attacking her. She's attacked. She's raped. And it's like, okay, so you assume that that's him because you've just seen his face, seen her. That happens. You put two and two together. So it's like, basically, the flashback is, okay, it's ambiguous, but that's the assumption you make because of the nature of film language. And so for a good half of the movie, you're just assuming that this guy is like a child rapist. And he's the one we're meant to be rooting for. It's bizarre. And it only then has another flashback to then reveal what really happened, that you realize that he's innocent. But it's like, why put that doubt in our minds? What narrative function did that have to make us believe that he was a monster for that entire time? Because it doesn't add anything to the character development, to the themes of the film.
The flashback sequences that are interspersed throughout are bizarre anyway, because they just kind of hard cut to them but they kind of flow. So like it'll be like someone in a van turning up, and then it'll be them, and then you'll just realize like halfway through the scene, oh, this is actually like from before. But
yeah,
there's no, like you say, there's no sort of narrative flow to it. It just kind of happens. And so you think, why are these flashbacks happening? They don't add anything anyway. It's just there to pad out the running time.
They could have. This is a film where it had a very simple idea, but they tried to overcomplicate it. And to be honest, it's like, I don't know if the budget informed the script or whatever, but they never get off this industrial estate. And the thing is, they've got a vehicle. They need to get away many miles away in order to survive this inevitable blast.
Nuclear explosion.
Yeah. And yet they keep stopping. They keep stopping the car. Whether it's to chat, whether it's to go into a building for no reason whatsoever, and then to kick off another action scene. And it's like, and the trouble is that makes it really hard to sympathize. So we've already think we're trying to sympathize with the child rapist. And then on top of that, a load of people make stupid decisions. So
there's a bit where one of they have a conversation, the sort of survivors saying, right, we really need to, like, we've got 30 minutes to get out of range of this nuclear blast. And then obviously a flashback happens, and at the end of the flashback, the camera sort of pans out, and they're all gathered round watching a home video on a camcorder. And you think, you realize there's a nuclear blast. Like, you might want to get your scooter on. You really have to go. And like John, that people just sacrificing themselves for no reason at all.
Yeah.
And constantly saying, I've got a plan. You're just going to have to trust me. And then dashing off to do something really stupid.
Yeah, just tell me what the plan is, and then we can all be on board.
It's terrible. It's really, really bad.
So why is it particularly that this was the film to break you?
It's because I've always, I mean, at the moment I'm sort of immersed in a personal mission to find a good Don the Dragon Wilson film, and I've not found one yet. But it made me think about in the 90s when you had films that were shot on location in like LA, New York, wherever, and you could always like sort of think, oh, there's always like a nice, interesting backdrop and sort of familiar sights and sounds sort of thing. And there's always like some level of quality to whether it be, and in those films in the 80s, 90s, even if it's just looking at someone's trousers and thinking, they are bright, like that's fine. That's sometimes enough to kind of sustain me for a 90-minute
carry you through.
Yeah, like voluminous pockets or something. That's fine. Give me some baggy pockets to look at, and I'm sorted. But then I realized that at the end of the DVD market sort of really kicked off in the early 2000s, and it was like anything could get released with like less quality control than the Nintendo eStore. You realize that, actually, these films are just really cynically made because there's like zero effort in this. The scenes sometimes just don't even follow each other and make any narrative sense. People are saying things that don't make sense. There's no, like, we were kind of lucky with this one because at least the practical effects were half decent. But I'm watching a load of like non-actors driving around a Romanian industrial estate, and for like 80 minutes, and you think everyone involved in this film knows it's crap. And it reminds me of like the Asylum features where if they're like winking at you, it's not funny. You want to watch something that's got some genuine heart, where someone was trying to have this kind of, trying to do something, it ended up being a noble failure, or it was kind of dated enough to enjoy, it's not particularly contemporary, but you can still enjoy it for different reasons. This is made just because they'll think, anyone will watch anything.
Yes. The whole thing, there is such a thing as so bad it's good, but the filmmakers, I don't think the filmmakers can be aware of that, because I think that spoils it. If as soon as the filmmaker starts winking at you and saying, "Yeah, we know it's bad," then or settling for just general badness, then it can't be so bad it's good. It's got to have something behind it where someone's really attempted to make something of quality, and which is why the best so bad it's good films are almost like the most heartfelt. I mean, if you watch like The Room or something like that, the reason it's hilarious is because it's clearly trying to do something serious
that it's just not capable of doing.
But it's massively overreaching itself, which is brilliant. But then you wouldn't be able to deliberately do that again. You wouldn't be able to capture that lightning in the bottle again, sort of thing. So yeah, it was a bad movie, and I know what you mean. It seems like it's a film made by committee. It's like they've almost looked at what it is, what we can do to maximize our tiny audience. All right, zombies are in. We have some action. We'll have this browny grey filter to make it look a bit like Call of Duty. We've got to point out as well that this property that like Uwe Boll was in, it's made by his production company. He produced it, and it's based on, we initially thought it was based on a 2007 Wii game that none of us had ever heard about, which is quite unusual for me and Rupert to not have ever heard about a game. And when we looked into it, it's actually an unreleased Wii game. So Uwe Boll obviously bought the rights. I thought, I can't be bothered to make this. It's just not worth it, but I've got to do something. So he just kind of said, I'll be in it for a couple of minutes. My name may get some viewers. And then he just sort of basically just sent it out to just be cobbled together by whoever. And it's just disheartening. I expected more from Uwe. Well, yeah, I mean, I suppose I do want, if he directed it, what might have been, or written it, then he might have been able to polish a turd. So yeah, so I'll have a quick rundown of Behind the Mask, the legend of Leslie Vernon, because this is one that you mentioned last week. The title is cumbersome, I've got to say. Like, I genuinely think some film titles work against their material, and it's a pity, really, because Behind the Mask, the legend of Leslie Vernon.
Please, the rise of Leslie Vernon.
Oh, is it? Okay.
I think so.
Well,
maybe it is the legend.
Well, anyway, like the fact that we're not really sure doesn't really kind of speaks to what I'm saying, really. And, you know, but the thing is, because it is quite a good film, and the premise is like you mentioned last time, it's a faux documentary where like Freddy Krueger and Michael Myers and Chucky and everything are real, and this documentary team meet a genuine, in inverted commas, slasher killer and he explains his methods, and like the kind of stuff that he likes to do, like scaring girls, leaving one survivor, removing like the batteries from the flashlights and stuff. And, you know, all these like mechanical little things he does to create the effect that we see in horror movies. But it's cool the way that it's done as if he's genuinely real. And what you see on screen as a result, it also really happens. It's quite a cool meta idea. Yeah. It's almost like a kind of more blunt version of Scream, really, with that extra meta layer. And then, so we see these methods, him describing his methods, and then the results kind of play out like a regular narrative film. Obviously, Robert Englund rocks up as a professor. It's the Donald Pleasance role. And Zelda Rubinstein, I noticed, out of Poltergeist. Good. I think she died soon afterwards.
Yeah, I think that was the last film,
Yeah. And I just found it consistently funny the way that, like, the Vernon himself is so, like, genial. And like he's quite witty
goofy,
sometimes. And he's a bit of and you're like really enthusiastic, and yet he'll just say really dark things in a really like joyful way. And the way that I think he goes to see his parents, doesn't he? And it's like, and they're really, really like encouraging him and just making out like the real apple pie kind of people, and just making out like us. Just it's great to see you doing so well and stuff like
so dedicated.
Yeah, really, so dedicated. Like it's so wholesome. It's deliberately a very different style to the films it's kind of referencing. It's very naturalistic and laid back and ironic, and it's almost like playing on that thing about the mundanity of evil, because of course like slasher things, they really make the killer like larger than life and much more than a human, and yet this is just about this kind of slightly derpy guy going around doing it as a kind of almost like a job, like a joyful job. I think in the last act is like where it kind of becomes more of a generic slasher, and I think it's probably less interesting than the rest of the film. But I definitely think
it earns that. It's like, okay, we're doing this, but
in a way it kind of had to end up like that, because you really want to see a lot of these things play out, and it is quite clever. And so in the absence of Scream, then I think this is a pretty good next stop, really. So it's called Behind the Mask, The Legend of Leslie Vernon, or possibly The Rise of Leslie Vernon.
Just Leslie Vernon. I really liked it, and I'm surprised that the cast didn't go on to do sort of greater things, because they're quite cool. And did you think as well, the main woman, did she remind you of Scarlett Johansson, or was that just me?
A little.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I can see it. She's a bit more mumsy, I would say.
Oh, sorry that she was heavier jumpers, Rupert.
Yeah.
So I watched a film I watched on last Monday on Netflix, was The Call with Halle Berry. Have you seen this?
Oh, yeah. No, I haven't. I've spotted it.
Obviously, after watching Cellular and really enjoying it, Faisal, there's another one you called The Call, and I thought she was talking about the remake of, oh my God, what was it called? The Stranger, whatever it was, with there was a remake of it starring Tommy Flanagan as the main bad guy. You know, that old urban legend about the babysitter on the phone and then he's in the house or whatever it is. But I was completely wrong, and this is actually a film about sort of a 911 operator played by Halle Berry, who through kind of a girl gets attacked by someone, and she calls 911, and Halle Berry's telling her to hide, and the call ends just as the killer's leaving the house. This is all in the first few minutes, and and then the call drops, so Halle Berry rings her back, and then the killer hears the phone ring under the bed, kills her, and Halle Berry just basically does a huge breakdown.
Right.
And obviously falls into the arms of Morris Chestnut, as we all will at some point. So then it cuts to her just being a trainer there, and she sort of gets dragged into a similar call where another girl is being kidnapped, and she's in the trunk of a car, and she rings 911. Halle Berry gets the call, and she's kind of determined at any cost to keep the girl alive. And it's actually really good. It's really tense. And it never gets ridiculous because there's a lot of like really nice tension in just when, you'd think it would just be a girl in the trunk, and then she's given like tiny bits of information, and Halle Berry's telling her to do certain things like kick out one of the taillights. So, we know you're on this huge stretch of highway, but like hopefully someone will ring in, or we'll see the damage, or like there's paint in there. She's like, just pour it out the back so we can see marks you're leaving. And everyone is kind of involved in finding it. And it's really cool. And it keeps that sort of tension up. And Halle Berry's pretty cool in it. It's like she's really, really keen to not let this girl die. Played by the girl is played by Abigail Breslin.
Yes.
And there was a point in it at the end, the last 10-15 minutes. Again, it's like, okay, we're going into like straight out kind of sort of horror thriller territory. That's fine because I've enjoyed the film so much I wouldn't let this happen. But there's a moment that really tickled me where the sort of person who's kind of behind it all, he's really like really sort of threatening in a kind of like full of nervous energy, like obviously can't control his demons kind of way. And there's a bit where they're in like at the end of the film, they're in like this sort of his place where he's keeping her, and he's going to do certain things to her, and she sort of sprays him in the face with like hairspray and runs and locks herself in another room in his kind of like in this sort of place he's got. And then when she runs in the room, he laughs to himself and says, "You are not going to like what you see in there." And it really, really tickled me because for a second he's like, "Oh God, you're not going to like that. When you turn that light on, you are not going to like what you see." And it really tickled me. It's like a moment of levity in the film. So yeah, it's a really good kind of like high octane 90-minute thriller. And to be honest, it reminded me a little bit when you see actors that have had such high profile careers like Halle Berry, or it reminded me of Kevin Costner, where you chuck him in like a 90-minute thriller and you're like, this is brilliant. This is like clearly better than anything you've done in ages.
Yes. Yeah, well, I think Halle Berry is good in everything she's in. She's one of these people who tends to elevate bad material because she's been in the odd bad thing, let's face it. But just like I said about Catwoman, she did exactly what she needed to do. Just because the material's bad doesn't mean that the lead actors aren't going to do a job. But yeah, this sounds actually genuinely good. It sounds pretty taut.
Her hair is astonishing in this film. It's like
it's like a massive curly bob, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not an afro because you think it's like an afro, but then you realize it's just like really carefully styled. It's a huge, like really beautifully coiffed bob. I was loving it. I do get hair jealousy in certain films. I look at you, Sandra Bullock, in 28 Days.
Jealous of Michael Jackson.
Jealous of Jacko.
That's a callback to one of our podcasts about 3 weeks ago, isn't it?
But people got to keep up. They should be chain ganging these anyway. So that's the call, and it's a recommended one.
Where's that available?
Netflix.
Okay.
Not my keyboard then.
The Departed is on Prime. Have you ever watched a film, disliked it, and then watched it years later and wondered why you disliked it?
No.
Because I didn't particularly like this film when it was 2005.
But weren't you a big fan of Infernal Affairs?
I think that might have been the issue. Yes. I loved the original Infernal Affairs. The sequels became progressively sillier and more kind of operatic, but I really like the first one. And I think part of what bothered me about this, I think The Departed is based on the first two, and so it's quite sprawling and long. But whereas Infernal Affairs was very taut, very compact. Anyway, the story is about set in Boston, and there's this big gangster called Frank Costello, played by Jack Nicholson, who he runs the place basically. So Matt Damon and Leonardo DiCaprio are cadets in the Special Police Force. So Matt Damon was a regular kid. Before, long ago, he was a regular kid in Boston, and he was brought under Frank's wing. And he is now working for Frank Costello as a rat, basically, in the department. Now, Leonardo DiCaprio, his character, he was not a regular kid. He was the son of gangsters. He was a bad boy, etc. But now he is a decent adult, and he is working undercover for the department as one of Frank Costello's goons, basically. So you've got basically they're both kind of like living a lie in their own way. So Leonardo DiCaprio is trying to gather evidence, while also trying to find out who the mole in the department is. Meanwhile, Matt Damon is warning Frank's crew of the investigation, whilst also trying to work out who the undercover agent is, because of course they don't know who each other are. So it's a ridiculously it's a complex yet hilariously brilliant setup, really, and it lends so much potential for like multiple layers of double crossing and stuff. I mean, the film doesn't really stop long enough to really consider that it's actually quite obvious who the undercover cop is, but in the form of Leonardo DiCaprio. But anyway, Mark Wahlberg's also in it. His hair in this film, oh my god,
isn't it like a jet black bouffant with no style?
Yeah, well, it's got really aggressive side parting, and it's swept over to the side. It's ridiculous. Anyway, he's quite funny as a super aggressive cop, and I just thought he's basically his character in The Other Guys. It was really funny. It's interesting to see Matt Damon play an asshole, basically. Jack Nicholson's good. Ray Winston is in it, putting on a Boston accent. Wow.
We do love an accent on The Men Who Talk.
Vera Farmiga is in it, and she, in another ridiculous complication to throw into the mix, she happens to be seeing both Matt Damon and Leonardo DiCaprio at the same time without the other knowing. It's preposterous. Anyway, the script is really good, and it's got this kind of believable kind of street language, yet the wordplay is very complex, and you are genuinely rooting for Leonardo DiCaprio because he had such a rough start in life, like being the son of gangsters and having that baggage, and then of course he's just in this situation, this undercover cop situation where anything could go wrong at any second. So you really, really want him to be okay. Yeah, so it's a really exciting movie and a really well written movie, and it's long, but it doesn't feel long. I don't think it's Martin Scorsese, by the way. I don't think it's Scorsese's best looking movie. There are a lot of office scenes which look very flat in terms of like the camera work and the lighting. It isn't his best looking movie. It's one of his more kind of visually dull movies, which is surprising, really, given this is kind of his wheelhouse, really. But maybe it's possible that he wanted to keep things a bit quieter on the kind of like on the directorial front, on the cinematography front, because the script is so complex that perhaps if he had flashy
focus on it.
Yeah, I think he just wants to keep it simple, which is fair enough. It's basically an absurdist tragedy, which is quite an unusual thing to see in Hollywood. As I say, it's a long film, but it's so packed with content, and the drama's so good. It's very fast moving, so it's not that it's a slow film. It's just there's a lot in it, and it moves very quick. So, yeah, definitely worth watching it again, even if you had reservations. 2005, 6, yeah.
Yeah.
That's that is on Prime.
The next one for me is a film called Cold Skin, which I think is from 2017, and stars David Oakes and Ray Stevenson. And the story is that David Oakes plays sort of a sort of weatherologist. I'm going to say meteorologist.
Yeah,
that'll do.
Yeah,
and he's a weatherman, and it's sort of the sort of turn of the century, and he is on this sort of vessel to take him out to study the weather for a full year on this remote island. And he gets dropped off there, and in this just like this shack. The previous sort of inhabitant is nowhere to be seen, and the only person there is Ray Stevenson, who I literally didn't recognize for 40 minutes, even though he's in Punisher Warzone, so he should have been straight on my radar. And he's just kind of like this really belligerent sort of stone-faced lighthouse keeper who appears to have sort of lost his mind. And he's there to sort of just escape the trappings of the sort of what was then the modern world. But the first night he is there, he gets in his sort of this really, really worryingly exposed shack. He gets attacked by these kind of amphibious humanoid creatures and just barely fights them off. And so the next morning he's like, I'm going to speak to Ray about this, quite frankly. It's a really pretty film. It's because it's set against this it's like an island, but it's not like a paradise at all. It's really hard black volcanic rock and like really thunderous waves crashing against the sort of the jaggedness of it. And when he sort of when he meets Ray Stevenson, he realizes that he has got one of these amphibious creatures that he's basically using as sort of a sex slave almost, because they're quite humanoid, and he's kind of sort of domesticated. I'll say her, but it's an it, and he's just basically raping it and like feeding it scraps. Yeah. So it's good because I thought, oh, this is going to be because I just thought it's just a really nice cover, so I just thought I'll watch it. It's a thriller, boom, a horror film sort of thing. But David Oakes has a really interesting screen presence because he's quite boyish and unthreatening, and in this film, I didn't really know where it was going to go, but at the end, I know that I wanted it to go somewhere else because, while it was like pretty to watch, without giving too much away in terms of spoilers, he sees this sort of humanoid creature that they call a Nereus that Ray Stevenson is sort of keeping and beating and so on, and he can obviously see the sort of the fact that it's sentient and that like it makes gifts for him so it can clearly think, and it's got like an emotional cycle. And the things that basically Ray Stevenson does and he is sort of forced to do, you think really the sort of the way the film goes and how it sort of how it culminates and wraps itself up, you think, I don't really have any sympathy for you because of the things you've chosen to do throughout this film. So I'm not sure where the director wanted my loyalties to lie. So while it was an enjoyable film... Do you
think that was a deliberate ambiguity, or do you just think it was just slightly faulty writing?
I would say it was faulty writing because it wasn't one of those films where I sat afterwards and thought about it. Like I watched it with Finn, we had a chat, we both just came to the conclusion that he's not forced into these things. He kind of half chooses to do them. So, there are so many times when he could just stop what's happening and he chooses not to. So at the end of the film, when it all kind of wraps up, you think, yes, I'm not sure if I'm completely on board with all your decision making, Mr. Oakes. But I enjoyed it, and it's a very pretty film to watch. And again, the creature effects are really good. It's a mixture of weirdly, one of the I don't have a name to hand. One of the actress who plays the creature is actually in that really tedious Spanish film I watched the other day, The Murder in the Twin Cities. So Twin Murders in the White City, I think it was called. But it's worth.
When was this made?
2017.
Okay.
So it's a mixture of practical effects and CG is what I was going to say, sorry.
But decent, tasteful CG.
Yeah, because the creatures only attack at night, and obviously because it's a lighthouse, there's like flashes of beams of light, and you can sort of see them scrabbling up the rocks and stuff. And it's not like, okay, here's a load of CG that we're going to really hone in on, so you can see the weightlessness of it.
Used sparingly, right? Good. Yeah. Well, that sounds good. What's it called again?
Cold Skin, and that is on Netflix.
Nice. Sounds like one I might want to watch.
I'd be intrigued to see what you think about it. That'd be good.
Yeah. Well, I'll move on then to Dirty Dancing.
Finally.
I know. Genuinely, finally. It's been on my watch list for ages. I was going to watch it with my wife, but in the end, we just never had that moment, so I had to watch it on my own. It's the only way.
This is a film I'm extremely familiar with, by the way. I've seen it about 25 times.
Have you really?
Yeah, I don't know why. I just like, my mum used to watch certain films on repeat, and this was just one I happened to just sat through a lot. And I do like the music in it, and I like Patrick.
I have never seen it before, so this was interesting for me. So obviously no particular nostalgia. Obviously I was aware that it's an 80s cult classic. But other than a few tunes, actually, it's not quintessentially 80s because you got like Hungry Eyes, and of course, I've Had the Time of My Life. No doubt there's some brackets in that title somewhere. So in a way, I think that helps it be timeless because the fact that it's set in the 60s. And I did like its presentation of the dreary kind of Butlin style entertainment of the compound they visit, because basically this teenager called she's 18, I guess, called Baby, nickname Baby, she's on a family holiday with her parents and sister to this slightly depressing like park in the mountains, like where you stay in a nice villa, and at night you'll go out and watch some gentle comedy and some aging musicians and some bit of swing dancing. I noticed that Dennis Nedry from Jurassic Park is the MC of this whole depressing affair.
Good.
Which is quite amusing. So anyway, one night Baby is tempted into the staff lounge area where she meets Johnny Castle, played by Patrick Swayze.
What a man.
And yeah, it's a bit of a coming of age moment, I suppose. I mean, it's pretty, the imagery is pretty clear. I mean, she's literally kind of called across this bridge, and she's even given a warning by a man carrying melons. I don't know if there's any kind of Freudian subtext to that, but anyway, there you go. It's weird enough to be noticeable. Yeah, so it's kind of from then on, it's like, well, Patrick Swayze is very like, he's very much like an extrovert living life to the full kind of thing. Also, he seems anyway at first, so it was very exciting to her. And he's older, and he's very kind of confident. And for her, then it's sort of a journey from naivety to seeing how the world works. It's from kind of wealth to privilege, as in understanding, seeing a world where people have come from, and how some people come from disadvantaged backgrounds, etc. A journey from being passive to being confident, and from fear to fearlessness, I think. And I think that goes for both the characters in a way. It still feels quite fresh to see a film which shows sexual desire from a female perspective, because it is interesting that she's very much lusting over Patrick Swayze and his body. So Baby's motivation for this is the other thing. Baby's motivation for going into this dance tournament with Johnny is quite interesting as well, because it's not that she just wants to be close to him all the time or anything like that. It's not an infatuation thing. It's because his usual dance partner has to get an emergency abortion. So
yeah, I remember it being surprisingly dark watching it as an adult.
Yeah,
something that totally passed me by as a child. I thought, this is really foul. She has like a botched back alley abortion.
Yeah, basically. And I like the way that the abortion thing isn't treated as a moral issue. It's treated as a medical issue. Like, There's no one around to say, this is wrong, what you do. It's just, right, okay, we need to get this sorted somehow. So, and I think that it's pretty well written, because the way that Johnny, Patrick Swayze's character, he's not just moody and cocky for the sake of it. It's almost like a defense mechanism, because he's really, really terrified by the prospect of actually being in love, because he's basically just been going around shagging women. Basically, that's what he does. But then, so it's interesting how it seems like Baby is the terrified party in this situation, but actually, it's him. He's the one who's terrified, and he's quite touchy and fragile, and not the pure ideal at all, in fact. And I did wonder if he was too old to play the role, but I think he is about right. He was quite a bit older than her, and he's always looked a bit older than he is. But
I suppose the whole part of it is the fact that he's kind of locked in this sort of adolescent fantasy.
Yes.
When he's actually he's getting embarrassingly older than everyone else that he's around.
And all leads up to a kind of big final act thing, which is pretty cool. It doesn't really make sense as such, because it is still 1969 and they're listening to what's clearly an 80s pop song. So, everyone's like in the crowd is like, yeah, this is amazing. This must be the future of music.
Yeah, is that gate reverb on that snare? That's amazing.
Exactly. I've never heard a snare like it. Is that real?
I must tell my friend Philip Collins about this.
Yeah. Hey, Giorgio, get over here. Listen to this. So it's a good film, and it is a real crowd pleaser. I mean, if I was going to direct someone to the key Patrick Swayze film, I don't know. It's up against a pretty stiff competition because you got Point Break, Ghost, Roadhouse, but it makes you realize that he was in some pretty awesome, iconic films.
Sorry, Rupert,
And
you didn't say Tiger Warsaw then.
no, I could have gone on with a list, but I had to stop somewhere. But like I mean, he has like just looking at those four: Dirty Dancing, Ghost, Roadhouse, Point Break. I mean, they're quite different, really. And I think he's interesting from the perspective of if you're going to do like, I don't know, a dissertation or something on masculinity, he would be an interesting case because of his slightly different depictions of masculinity in these films. So yeah, and I think it's a good film, Dirty Dancing, and I can understand why people worship it in a way because it's got a bit of everything.
I just as you were talking then, I was obviously listening, but I just realised that I've been making a mistake in my head for the last 10 years because the father in that film is played by Jerry Orbach,
right?
And I thought he was the same person who was in a really like a sort of a really maudlin kind of drama that I really like called Hard Eight, but it's actually Philip Baker Hall from 1996, starring. It's an early role for John C. Reilly. So if anyone fancies that, it's Hard Eight with Philip Baker Hall and John C. Reilly from '96. It just reminded me of it, and I just realised it's not Jerry Orbach in it.
Paul Thomas Anderson who made that?
It could well be,
Yeah, I think it might have been his first film.
I really liked it. I watched it a few years ago, and it's a very quiet film. Okay then, so moving on from Dirty Dancing, I watched Dirty Dancing 2. No, if I did. I watched the Fanatic with John Travolta, directed by Fred Durst. And Faye chose this film based entirely on John Travolta's haircut in the thumbnail, because it's like a bowl cut with a mullet at the back, all grey, but like a really high fringe. So I was like, I think I've heard about this, and then I put it on, and it was like, it was obviously a thriller just by the way the titles were coming up. John Travolta, and then when it said directed by Fred Durst, I did think, banger. I've never listened to this man's music, let alone watch like a 90-minute film that he's written. So the premise is, obviously being called the Fanatic, John Travolta is someone who lives on sort of Hollywood Boulevard and is obsessed with movie stars, and specifically a movie star called, I think his name's like Hunter Dunbar, who is played by Devon Sawa, who everyone will remember from Final Destination.
Of course. And
it's just about John Travolta's character trying to get, it starts off with him trying to get just an autograph off him for a jacket that's a prop from one of his films, and he sort of gets fobbed off because he's done it at a really bad time, and he kind of gets more involved in getting his autograph, and he tries to ingratiate himself into Hunter Dunbar's life. Now, I'm always really wary because in this film, John Travolta plays someone who has clearly got learning difficulties and social issues.
Yes.
So I'm always dubious about that. I never feel comfortable anyway. But I thought that it was fine because as being someone who kind of goes to like video game expos, I am exposed to a lot of people who clearly have like real social anxiety problems. And I thought a lot of the stuff that John Travolta was doing, it's kind of over exit in some scenes, but it's pretty, a lot of it's pretty close to what I personally have seen, in a sort of casual way, just going around these things, these events. And it gets across the blind dedication and the blurring, not understanding that when someone is an actor or, they're not really that person. There's a really tedious narration by his best friend in it. And I don't know why it's in the film. It's just that the characters in the film are very good and bad. Like John Travolta is kind of like a sort of misunderstood sort of person, and then his friend is a very good person, and she does the narration for no reason at all. And then Devon Sawa's character is obviously very bad. And there are two real problems with the film. One of them is that the way it's not so much the way that John Travolta acts this character, it's the way that he's treated so badly at so many points in the film by people who they just always attack him, and you're basically attacking someone who's got mental problems. And Devon Sawa's character, just when he's interrupted by being asked for an autograph by John Travolta, and who's called Moose for some reason, and and he's trying to talk to his ex-wife on the phone. He just basically tells him to get lost. It's very clear that his character's got issues, and he's just completely dismissive of it. And it's almost to the point that his character is like a comedy villain, really. Like you'd have to be a really damaged person to speak to someone with mental issues and learning difficulty in that way. It's quite preposterous.
So you think it's disingenuous in the way that it depicts people's responses to him, that it's overly aggressive towards him?
Yeah. Like there's a couple of people that are like, kind of like, oh, hey Moose, how you doing? And he dresses up as his kind of job is he dresses up as like a London Bobby on Hollywood Boulevard, and people have their pictures taken with him. It's some funny scenes where he's like getting dressed in a public toilet, putting the fake moustache on and the sort of tit hat, and he's just like trying to put on a London accent. They are quite funny because it's so wide of the mark. But yeah, Devonson's character is just ridiculous in it. He's so hostile to him all the time, and at no point during this whole thing, as the sort of tension ramps up, does he think, oh, actually, I'm being a bit unfair on this guy who's clearly just a bit misguided. And there's a moment, I'm not going to say what happens, but there's a moment about halfway through the film where something happens, and there's a real moment where you think, okay, now my loyalties may not be as clear cut as they were, Mr. Travolta. And I think it's a kind of a ridiculous plot point to include, because what it does is it kind of takes away your sympathy for him. So then you're left with like, oh, that didn't really need to happen. Kind of like Cold Skin. You think, I feel like there's like you're chucking too much into this film when it was actually being handled quite nicely, and now you're like, okay, that's just a ridiculous plot point.
So it takes away your sympathy. But does that mean it takes away your empathy? I mean, is it that it's just frustrating that it's been such a turnaround in the character, or is it that it doesn't make any sense to the character to have that included? I
think it just goes a bit too far in how how his character would react to a certain situation. I think that it's a bit over the top. I will say though that although I did it actually, I probably wouldn't watch it again. I'd watch it with you if you checked it on. If you said, do you mind watching this again? And I kind of enjoyed it because I was waiting for it to go too far, and the ending kind of got on my nerves a little bit. But Faye found the scenes where he's like in this guy's house, in this kind of Beverly Hills mansion sort of thing, and the guy doesn't know he's there, like really weirdly tense. Like she was like really like properly like got a hand over her face, just saying, "Oh my God, just get out the house before he sees you." Because of course he's not like some subtly. He's literally just walking around like using his toothbrush and like eating his food, and the guy's like in the next room. And I kind of found it like quite darkly funny, but Faye was really found it tense, because he's kind of so amiable and clueless. So yeah, it's not. I looked online after it because of course I heard nothing about it, but it got slaughtered, absolutely slaughtered, and John Travolta got like put up for like worst, like a Razzie for worst actor, and I thought no, it's fine. Again, if you don't have these ridiculous expectations, it's a decent thriller. Yeah.
Decent thriller, and would you say it's a decent exploration of the particular mental health problems depicted? Because I wonder if sometimes it can be an issue for professional critics to like if they're expecting a deep exploration of mental health, and then what they get is like more of a genre thriller, it can be quite a leap. I know that, for example, Joker was attacked on similar grounds in its depiction of mental health, but then is that what you're there for? Are you really?
No, I personally wasn't, and because I kind of have like sort of a little bit of experience with people with similar issues,
yes.
I was quite sort of, I thought, yeah, I can actually, if you took that, like if I actually spend a lot of time with a person, all the idiosyncrasies, I can imagine that would be, if it was taken to its like logical conclusion, that would be what the person would be like. Okay. It made sense to me. I didn't think it was. I mean, it got a little bit full on at times, but it was never like, I was never thinking, oh, come on, really?
Yeah.
So, which to me is acceptable. I was happy with how it was all done.
So that's The Fanatic, and it's on.
That was on Now TV.
Oh right. Okay.
I'm branching out, baby.
Branching out. Branching out, or got a free trial?
I don't know. I still haven't decided on my dog's name.
right then, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, to give it its full title.
Yeah.
This was from the mid-90s. It was written by Frank Darabont. He of Shawshank
Green
Redemption,
Mile and
Green
yeah.
Mile.
Was it directed by Kenneth Branagh?
It was. So we will come to that. But yes, so this is right. Okay. Frank Darabont was unflinching in his assessment of this movie because he wrote it and he absolutely hated it. He hated the operatic direction that Kenneth Branagh took it. To be honest, I'm not really sure what he's expecting because, I mean, Kenneth Branagh up to this point had made like Henry V. I mean, it's so over the top, these films. Very theatrical in style. But anyway, he is right, though. The film is relentlessly like brash and loud and flashy. And the camera work is just drunk and reeling most of the time. Some of the production design is pretty stunning. Like there's one set with this enormous blue staircase, colossal blue staircase rising up the walls with no rails, and it just looks gorgeous. And the kind of grimy kind of underworld of Ingolstadt, the village in Germany where the experiments are done, it looked pretty cool. I noticed that Sherry Lungi plays Kenneth Branagh's mother, even though she's only... I checked, I thought, hang on, she can't be that old. No, she's 9 years older than him. It's ridiculous. You get... There's...
So Kenneth Branagh stars in it and directed it?
Yeah.
Right.
So Kenneth Branagh is playing Frankenstein. So he is... he obviously wants to, research, experiment with this technology of electrifying dead matter back to life, basically. And it's apparently pretty firmly kind of respectful to the original book. So yeah, it's obviously pseudoscience and that, but it's interesting anyway. Robert De Niro plays the monster, and he's not very good. It comes down to really he's horny and angry, really, and if he can't indulge one, then he'll indulge the other, to be honest. In fact, I found that all of the performances were pretty bad, but I don't know how to explain that, whether it's because of Kenneth Branagh's stage background. You would have thought that would make him good with actors, or maybe it's just, maybe he was reaching for this kind of over the top theatricality, which doesn't really come across very well on film. But the problem isn't really that it's melodramatic as such, because that's fine. I mean, Bram Stoker's Dracula is melodramatic as well, and that's good. But the problem here is that it's not a horror movie. It's not directed like a horror movie. It's directed like an action movie, and it's got this really irritating, bombastic score over the top, which just sounds like an action movie. There's no kind of gothic kind of atmosphere to it or anything. It's just pure bombastic cacophony of sound, really. So yeah, it's written by someone who loves horror and knows horror in the form of Frank Darabont, and directed by someone who evidently doesn't want to make a horror film, and the results are not great. It's more like a bunch of like Shakespearean lovies doing everything in their power to kind of bring dramatic weight to something that wants to be. It would rather be the Elephant Man than Frankenstein, put it that way.
Right, okay.
And yeah, I don't know whether it's to do with the original novel or what, but it's not clear what we're meant to really think of Victor Frankenstein, because there's this one bit where he has this big like wedding night love scene with all this kind of wailing music, and it's like we're meant to feel some sort of sympathy for this hero, but he's really not a hero. I mean, he is a witch doctor who's shagging his sister. That is what's happening.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, okay, not biological sister, but still, it's a bit creepy. But yeah, so it's quite long, very melodramatic, not scary and not sad. And I think the not scary stuff is down to Kenneth Branagh's direction and his whole approach to it. And the not sad part is down to the performances. I mean, the script is okay, but the way it's delivered, it just doesn't. There's no emotional resonance whatsoever at the end. You just think, "I'll just get on with it."
It's a shame, really, because with this sort of subgenre of gothic horror we've touched upon the last few weeks, you've got, watch Bram Stoker's Dracula, and it's pretty much a masterpiece. And then you watch Interview with the Vampire, and you're like, oh, I'm just bored. And then you watch this, and it's just not good. It'd be interesting to sort of see really good sort of examples of the genre, especially sort of smaller ones.
I think part of the problem is that they need a certain budget. Because you can't
just throw money at it. It doesn't work in that genre.
Well, I mean, because a lot of horror films are low budget, and you can get away with it a lot of the time. But for something on this scale, where you need these sets and everything, you don't want to be using CG backgrounds and stuff. You need to have that physical presence there. So it's got to be pretty grand. And so you have occasional ones, good ones like Dracula or Crimson Peak, which are really good, and then. But they're few and far between, and they just don't make the money, because the kind of horror films that people tend to be watching nowadays seem to be fairly grounded in the real world, usually modern day and kind of relevant to current politics, perhaps. And gothic horror is so far away from that because, of course, they tend to be period pieces. They tend to be quite over the top. They tend to be very overtly supernatural. So I don't know, maybe it's probably very difficult to make a gothic horror film, but there aren't enough people out there like Guillermo del Toro who want to keep it alive, I guess.
Yeah, I feel like I should watch Crimson Peak again, but I will not watch Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. I don't think I've ever seen it.
No, I remember watching it at the time and finding it boring, and not much has changed in that regard.
When was it released? Was it mid-90s? Is it late 90s?
Yeah, I want to say 95, 96, about.
Okay. So after Bram Stoker's Dracula as well. They could have really learned from that.
Yeah, after, I guess it was part of that mini movement of Bram Stoker, and then Interview with the Vampire, and then I suppose then it was this. Maybe Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. I don't think it did terribly well. So maybe it was the nail in the coffin. I don't know.
I will now talk about Triple Threat, which is a martial arts action film I watched with Tony Jaa, Iko Uwais, and Tiger Chen. We obviously know from Tony Jaa from the Ong Bak series. Yeah. Iko Uwais is from
The Raid.
Gareth Evans' The Raid series, and Tiger Chen is from The Man of Tai Chi, which was starring and directed by Keanu Reeves. And then
trio.
I know, but also it's not just a triple threat, because you've got Scott Adkins, my boy, and Michael J. White as well. So this came on. It was one of those things when Faye said, I'm just going to have a quick nap. And I said, I'm just going to quickly watch a martial arts film then. So I chucked it on. And it's a weird one. I really enjoyed it. It's obviously got a bit of money behind it. And I think a lot of people didn't like it because they thought that cast, it's going to be wall-to-wall fighting. But the story is that at the start, Michael J. White and a few of his other guys use Iko Uwais and Tiger Chen as sort of these guides, these Asian guides, to lead them to this sort of place where Scott Adkins, their kind of mercenary commander, is being held. And when they rescue him, they basically just blow the whole place up and turn on everyone. And so the film is sort of the two guys, and I'm trying to think which one it was that was captured now. It was Iko Uwais that was captured, and him playing them both off each other as they both try to take each other out. And it's one of those films that at the start, right? So they blow up this camp, they rescue Scott Adkins, they blow up the camp thinking everyone's dead, and they're not. And then, this sort of group of mercenaries are on this mission, and they find out that the guys that they thought they killed have survived, but it makes no difference to them, right? So their plan is to do this mission, kidnap this Asian businesswoman, and then just ransom her and get a load of money, and then just disappear. So they could just think, those three guys that, as far as we know, just led us to that village. I don't really care if they survive or not. We'll do this, get our money, and then skedoodle. But they just they just get like really hell bent on killing them for no real reason. In fact, there's a point where Michael J. White says all those guys have survived, and Scott Adkins actively says, "Oh, like I don't care. It's fine. Let's just do this and go." And then when that job gets botched, they're like, "Right, we need to split up and disappear for a bit until the heat cools down." And Scott Adkins is the one that says, "No, actually, we need to kill those guys now." Right. So the film kicks off, and I really liked it because it's quite weirdly light-hearted. When it cuts to sort of the trio of the sort of the Asian actors who've kind of trying to keep the girls safe, they have some nice banter. The only problem is that they sometimes speak in their own languages with his subtitles, which is fine. But then there are scenes when they speak to each other in English, and obviously English. I don't know if it was like learned phonetically, but when they're trying to be sort of dramatic. Using not their own language, it's like the wrong parts of words emphasized, and it comes across as really clunky. Whereas if they just said, "Look, just speak your own language, really," and and that's fine, we'll just subtitle it. It would have been much smoother.
Why is there a mix? Why
I don't know. I couldn't work it out. In
some scenes they use the native language.
Yeah.
Then obviously they're prepared to do that.
Yeah.
Then why not just go the whole hog and just have them speak their language?
I don't know. I was trying to work it out, but because I thought. Initially, I thought it was because there was like other characters who were like American characters in the scene they were talking to, but no, even when they were amongst themselves, they would like flick between them, and I'm not entirely sure why it happened. It just made certain scenes a bit more awkward than they needed to be. There's some really nice sort of set pieces, and there's the sort of ending, like the big sort of fight that leads up to is quite satisfying as well.
Yeah.
And I quite liked it, and I was quite surprised when I did watch it afterwards that it got pretty slaughtered just because it wasn't. I think it was just too much expectation. I mean, you've got that kind of cast, you just expect people like 2 hours of action. But I thought it was some parts quite funny. It's quite nice. It was nice to see. It was nice to see like a lot of Asian actors in like a relatively big budget movie where it wasn't just them fighting and they actually got time to talk and there was some sort of lighthearted comedy scenes. I quite enjoyed that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I also will say that I'm just going to say that Scott Adkins dyes his beard in that movie. I'm just going to come out and say it. And if anyone,
had to say it.
If anyone is watching this, if any film any actor is ever in and they dye their hair, that's fine. But don't dye your beard to match it. It just looks silly.
I think that's another Steven Seagal trope. But
yes.
I would not criticize him given that he's sponsoring this show. So.
Oh yeah, obviously we can't just have a go with him.
No.
But yeah, that's and that's also what John Nettles did as well in Apocalypse Z. Was he just stupid? He's clearly in his 60s. He is constantly out of breath in that film.
Yeah, there were scenes. There was a scene early on in Apocalypse Z where someone runs back to John Nettles. So John Nettles has not done the running, and obviously
the fact we're calling it John Nettles.
But the guy who's run over, he's out of breath because he's just run. But John Nettles, when he's talking to him, is also out of breath. It's like you know why the other guy's out of breath, John, don't you? It's because he's just run, but you haven't.
He hasn't been leaning against a van, is he? Like you have. So I don't know why you're out of breath.
Yeah. Wow. So yeah, what's it? Triple Threat,
and I watched that on Prime, and I quite enjoyed it. I thought it was really good, and I kind of hope that they make a lot. I mean, I'll watch Scott Adkins in any film because most of his films are pretty solid. But it was just nice just to see it was almost like an Expendables for maybe not such a high tier. I liked it.
Just going back to the thing you were saying about expectations of wall-to-wall action, I suppose. I think maybe with stuff like The Raid and more recently John Wick, there can be an expectation of those being the kind of pinnacle of action movies because of the fact of the sheer quantity of action in them, because they are unusual in their relentlessness. But I don't think that's necessarily what makes an action movie by any means, because I just think really, I mean, yes, you want a few good set pieces and you want a satisfying ending, please, Lone Wolf McQuade, but you don't. It's not necessary for it to be just non-stop action. I mean, there can, as long as it's got a propulsion to it, as long as it shifts, and as long as the main plot beats are informed by people taking action, not necessarily a massive fight scene or a car chase, but people taking action, then I think that's fine. And yeah, I wouldn't want that sort of filmmaking to go away.
There's also a sequence in this film where someone gets the corner of a room and they get shot. They're sort of half sitting up against the wall, and they just get shot with, I think it's like a combat shotgun. And you said in The Last Days of American Crime, he gets shot in the chest with a combat shotgun, and he basically just like wipes it off and carries on fighting.
Oh yeah, yeah.
That doesn't happen in this film. They disintegrate. It's just like I actually rewound it because it's really nice effects. I rewound it a couple of times and thought, she is not getting up from that. So yeah, that was quite cool.
Oh right, so what would actually happened. Okay. Good.
Yes, yeah, it's bizarre, isn't it? So yeah,
okay.
I've got 1.5 left. So yeah, it's up to you.
I've got maybe 3 left. So 10 to Midnight is next. This is on Netflix, and 10 to Midnight is, as you say, a Charles Bronson film. I watched this actually not because of him, but because I wanted a bit of Wilford Brimley, and
nice,
who's recently died, R.I.P.
Yeah.
Yes, and I'd watched The Thing too recently, so obviously naturally I'll go to 10 to Midnight. Now this is directed by J. Lee Thompson, and he was making thrillers for a long time. I mean, he made some pretty solid ones in the 50s and 60s, like in Alex and The Guns of Navarone and Cape Fear, the original Cape Fear. Then in the 80s, he was nabbed by Cannon to make Twaddle like Death Wish 4, The Crackdown. So, which we discussed on this program previously. I will note, by the way, I did make a note of the fact that one of Cape Fear's key themes is about the dangers of violent justice. So it's interesting the direction he's now taken, J. Lee Thompson. Anyway, so this is called 10 to Midnight, and it was made in 1983, and it's basically a police thriller with slasher elements. I suppose that's quite deliberate because everyone likes a cop film, but also you think about 1983. I mean, that would have been really in the kind of slasher explosion of the early 80s. So
like a bit of a. Am I right in saying it's kind of a bit of a sort of rip-off of what's that film with Clint Eastwood as well, Dirty Harry?
Possibly, although it's been too long since I watched Dirty Harry to see the. Now you mention it, yes, I can imagine. Yes, there are elements of it. Now, Charles Bronson, he plays a detective on the trail of a guy who. Basically, he kills women who reject his sexual advances, and they do tend to. The killer is like this. He's like a very angry incel, basically.
Played by anyone we know?
No, although he did go on to play, I think, a different killer in a different Charles Bronson film in the 80s as well, which is weird. Now, naturally, when the killer finds out that Bronson, who's obviously investigating him, when he finds out that Bronson has a daughter, he targets her. So the guy himself is quite unique. He always attacks. He's always naked when he attacks the women. And so you get these kind of amusing scenes where he's confronting these women, and there's like a strategic tree branch covering his dignity, which is quite funny. It's pretty grotty, really. Like in terms of, especially when it turns to the kind of point of view shots, you get the real voyeur shots of him ogling women undressing and stuff like that. But there are some well staged kind of tension scenes in it. I got the sense that there's a suggestion that the killer is a repressed gay man, because he will always go up to these women and make sexual advances, but he's not a rapist. And I did notice there was when his house is investigated, there was male porn in the toilet. So there's like this almost unspoken subtext to this whole thing.
Okay.
Wilford Brimley plays the Stetson wearing police chief, naturally.
Not too much of a stretch then.
No, not really. Charles Bronson's a bit of a tedious dad-like guy, constantly admonishing people for like tiny misdemeanors like smoking weed and stuff. or complaining how law and order has been eroded naturally.
Obviously.
Yeah. There's a little bit of in the killer. There's a little hint of the kind of American Psycho in him, because he's very well groomed, very preening, got this sense of self-maintenance. I think the guy's name is Gene Davis, and he's film
from Cutthroat Island.
That's Gina Davis. It's a woman. Messenger of Death was the other film that he was in. And I think that was with Bronson. I think that was also directed by J. Lee Thompson as well. So there you go. So what's good about this film, and it is quite good, not great, but quite good. I like the fact that they strongly suspect the guy, but they just can't nail him. And I like the fact that does create this kind of narrative tension. I like that Bronson's daughter is a fully fleshed out character, and she's not just a plot device. That's good. And the focus really does shift in a very interesting direction halfway through. And it becomes less of a straightforward cat and mouse thing, and it gets better because of that. It definitely raises some moral questions, albeit quite basic ones. And you get the usual kind of Bronson sentiments of like lack of justice and complaining how a mentally ill person spent 6 months in the nut house and was pronounced cured, and then he shot his parole officer. It's like, yeah, being a bit selective there, Charles, but okay, I'm sure it does happen. Anyway, so it's actually, even though it's pretty grotty and dated in some ways, the music, wow, it's an amazing synth score. Because it's not like, proper like snare driven synth hadn't really got a foothold quite yet. So you still got that kind of 70s experimental kind of sound to it, like really weird bubbling, almost organic sounds. It's so good.
Terry Riley is
yes, Baba O'Reilly. It's actually a pretty taut little thriller, and it's got genuinely like tense final sequence, which is really quite well staged.
And of course, I'm assuming from what you said, this is grotty and it's the 80s. It's New York, isn't it? And that, which you love. I'm pretty sure that Faye really likes this film, and we've watched it a couple of times. I might have to watch it tonight. Yeah,
it's worth it. I mean, it's just good. I mean, it's very much of its time, but you put it in its time, and it's perfectly enjoyable. I can't imagine how it could possibly be made these days. But yeah, it's pretty good. It's a good slasher / cop thriller. Back on the poster.
40 years later, I watched a film called The Wolf Hour, again on Now TV, starring Naomi Watts. Is this something you are familiar with?
I am familiar with her, but not this particular work.
Well, it just looked interesting because it's basically just her smoking fags in New York in the late 70s. She's got agoraphobia for reasons that aren't entirely clear at the start of the film. Maybe aren't entirely clear at the end. And she's sort of in this New York apartment during the heat wave, with the Son of Sam killers.
Right.
The Son of Sam murders, sorry. So the film is, she's ostracized herself from her family, and she's living in a really grotty, dingy apartment, and she's kind of running out of money. And it turns out, sort of partway through the film, you realize that she's an author that's written like one sort of smash book, but she's expected to write another, and the money for that is dwindling. And it's kind of the camera very rarely leaves the apartment. It's all very much, she is the main focus, and she's in every single scene, and it's just people coming and going to the apartment for different reasons, and her just trying to, get the second book done. And I really enjoyed like the sweatiness of it, and the chain smoking, obviously, and just the sort of the clothing is amazing, like just yellow crop tops and massive flares signed me up. But I kind of realized, when you watch a film and after about 45-50 minutes you think, this is Amblin, this is really Amblin along, this is Steven Spielberg's Amblin Entertainment along. And I was enjoying it, and then when it came to finished, I thought, I wish that I enjoyed the plot and what it was trying to say more than as much as I enjoyed just watching Naomi Watts, not in a sexual way, but just she's just very nervous in it, and she's kind of broken, and she comes across really well in how she's just a completely fractured person for reasons that kind of become more and more apparent as the film goes on.
She does seem fractured very well, doesn't she?
Yeah.
Naomi Watts. You think about like 21 grams, like she's just such a mess in that, and then Mulholland Drive.
Film, that is.
Yeah, she does do it very well. She can be broken very well.
And she's thin enough to actually snap as well in this film, because she's definitely living nowhere near her Greg's. But I just wish that the payoff was a bit more interesting than it was. She is good in it, but the film in and of itself isn't particularly good.
Right.
It seems to have. I get the sense that it seems to think it's got this big ideas, but they're not really explored.
Okay.
So yeah, but it's definitely worth a watch as just like a little character study sort of thing, because she is really good in it.
Is the realization of the period convincing?
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah. Well, it's hard to say because you never really leave the apartment. So. Oh
yeah, good point. Yeah.
So, no, it's worth the goosey.
Okay, but just the first 45 minutes before I get bored.
Yeah, but until you start. Well, the moment you start to expect something, turn it off.
That's a resounding recommendation, then. So that's on Now TV, and it's called what again?
The Wolf Hour. I'll really quickly, because I'll leave the rest up to you. Then I've got In Fabric to talk about really briefly, because like I said, I didn't watch the whole thing. So what happened was I was working, and Faye said, I'm just going to go in the bedroom and check a film on. And I thought she said, I'm going to watch Fabric. And I just assumed it was some period drama about a dressmaker or something. I was like, oh, okay. And then she sort of came in about 20 minutes later. And I didn't know anything about this film. I didn't know Peter Strickland, from Barbarian Sound Studio, directed it. And I really like Barbarian Sound Studio. Yeah. And she came in about 20 minutes later and said, this film's really weird. It's really weird. Like, it's very odd things happening. And then after about 45, 50 minutes, I finished work and went in and watched it with her, and I laughed. It's one of those. It's so funny. There's such odd sequences in that film about this. It's effectively this kind of red wraparound satin dress that when people kind of come into contact with it, it kind of takes over their lives, and not only does it make them kind of do dark things or have these dark thoughts, but people interact with them very strangely, and it's very surreal. And there's constant sequences about a guy who fixes washing machines, and he's just really boring. He's just got this unmanageable hair, just quite a plain face, and he's like just boring NHS glasses, and he's constantly just around people's houses, like staring into the empty, broken drum of a washing machine, and just in a really monotone voice, just listing off like possible issues. Oh, it was. Oh yeah, the adjudicator's probably come off the wing nut, which is attached to the fan belt, and and then people are behind him, like rolling their eyes in this weird ecstasy that they get when he talks. I was loving it, and there's a sequence in it where I will probably just watch on YouTube, and I'm not going to give too much away, but it's a sequence where one of his friends comes up to him, and he's like in work, and his mate says, "You're in real trouble." And he's like, "What?" And they said, "They know. Someone saw you." I didn't do anything. No, they got pictures, mate. They saw what you did. They saw you fixing your own washing machine. And it's just this brilliant, like, just complete blank slate comedy. I was laughing. So I don't know enough to say, like, I did watch the last 45 minutes, but I fully intend to watch the whole film because I think it'll be one of the funniest films of the year.
I was not expecting that to be a complete thigh slapper. But, here we are. Because I mean, Barbarian Sound Studio was quite funny at times, but only in its kind of darkness. And the thing I found funny about Barbarian Sound Studio was just the fact that he was. It's obviously Toby Jones, and he's such a kind of small, meek man, and he's in such a bad situation, such an alien situation,
threatening situation.
Yeah. And I loved it. Was constantly funny just having that set up there. But yeah, I'm definitely gonna have to watch this. Where is it available?
It was on Now TV again. That was one of the first ones I watched on Now TV. So definitely worth a watch.
Okay. Well, I'll quickly whiz through K9 then, which is on Netflix. Made in 1989.
The golden year.
James Belushi is investigating a drug trafficking operation in downtown LA. He needs a sniffer dog, obviously, so he enlists Jerry Lee, as the dog is known. It's kind of a human canine buddy cop thing, directed by the same person who did Teen Wolf and Beethoven's Second. So, to give you some idea of the quality. Now, I'm going to say a name, Chris Pratt, right? You know who he is?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So, right, Chris Pratt, I remember when, maybe it must have been around Guardians or possibly around Jurassic World, I saw a lot of talk about how of comparisons between Chris Pratt and Harrison Ford, right? Younger Harrison Ford, which were completely wrong because they completely misunderstood what Harrison Ford's persona was. But anyway, so that was wrong. But I realized watching James Belushi in this movie, it's Chris Pratt. He could, if they were going to do a remake, it would be Chris Pratt in this film. He's cocky, he's wisecracking, overconfident, brave to the point of stupidity, as in just wading into situations and stuff.
Chubby, thin in hair, not funny.
Very occasionally amusing, but mostly charmless. So, and Ed O'Neill and Pruitt Taylor Vince also rock up in this as well. Good.
Yes.
So, I mean, the actual plot is pretty standard. Lawrence Gordon produced action thriller stuff. Belushi's character, he single-handedly trawls bars and warehouses and alleys, questioning suspects in an idiosyncratic way, shall we say, working his way to the top of the trafficking tree. Like many action comedies of that period, it is a little bit too brutal to appeal to younger kids, but at the same time, it's not funny for adults. So inevitably, the dog is the real star of the show. But then Turner and Hooch was released the same year, and it's a better film. And it's got the more charming star. So really, your mileage entirely depends on your capacity for James Belushi. And I have almost zero capacity for James Belushi. So
unless it's in Red Heat, I know you're going to say
naturally. But yeah, it's literally just him the whole way through, and it's like it reminded me of that Bordello of Blood. Who was the guy in that?
Dennis Miller.
Yeah. He's a bit like him, where he's just needlessly sarcastic and unpleasant to people a lot of the time. And it's like, I don't know whether you're meant to want to be like him, because I really don't want to be like him. Because sometimes, part of the comedy is watching someone act in a way that you kind of wish you could sometimes, just letting loose and saying what you really want to say. But he never says what I really want to say. He's just a bit of an oaf. So,
two quick things. One of them is that K-9000 was a film that terrified me as a child because where my bedroom used to be, my parents were watching K9 downstairs, and all I could hear was like a dog barking ferociously and like flashes of blue light off the TV. And it just terrified me as like a toddler. And the second thing is that there's a pseudo sequel called K-9000 starring Catherine Oxenberg and Chris Mulkey. That was a made-for-TV movie that you should probably watch as well.
Should I? No.
Yes, you should.
Well, I suppose it hasn't got James Belushi in it, so therefore
we review films, Rupert. We don't always review good films.
That's true. That is true. And how apt as we go on to Ghost Rider on Prime. So this was made in 2007, just before Marvel started crafting their universe. I'm guessing the reason it hasn't really been resurrected or mentioned in Avengers is because of rights. Because I think this was one of the Columbia Pictures Marvel films, as in Columbia Pictures, which is part of Sony, and they did the Spider-Man ones. So anyway, there was a sequel apparently to Ghost Rider, Spirit of Vengeance.
Yes, I was going to say, was there a sequel? Was Nicolas Cage in that as well?
I think so, and it was directed by Neville Dean and Taylor of Crank fame.
Oh, by the way, K-9000 was written by Stephen E. D'Souza, I forgot to say.
Of course it was. So yeah. Okay. So Johnny Blaze and his dad, they work at this traveling circus. His dad's like a stunt bike rider. Anyway, he's got cancer, his dad, and so this young Johnny Blaze makes a deal with the devil, played by Peter Fonda, good, to cure his dad's cancer. And he does, but then instantly kills him in a bike stunt. So
Yeah, he does that, doesn't he, the devil?
yeah, he's a cheeky one, isn't it? You probably don't want to be doing deals with him.
When he made the deal and Johnny Blaze was like, oh, cheers for that, did the devil go...
Pretty much did, actually. I think he does start cackling as he's like hunched over his body. So anyway, it cut to modern day, and Johnny is Nicolas Cage with dyed hair, kind of trying to make him look younger than he is. He's a bike stuntman. So meanwhile, in modern day, the devil, he's not actually the devil, it's Mephistopheles, but let's just call him the devil. The devil's son, played by Wes Bentley, is prowling around, sucking out people's souls. He's looking for some ancient contract, which means that he can have
a T-Mobile phone with 800 minutes a month. Only $5.
I think he wants all the human souls, but then, who wouldn't? So basically the father is hiring Ghost Rider, Nicolas Cage, to take out his son, basically. So yeah. Oh, that's the other thing. Yeah, Johnny Blaze is now a flaming skulled superhero type thing.
Fair enough.
It's directed by Mark Steven Johnson, best known for 2003's Daredevil.
Whoa!
It's sort of all right to look at in that bland, artless Marvel way,
Oh, okay.
I'm not familiar with the comics, but I gather that Johnny Blaze is being toned down in the film because he drinks hard and smokes a lot, apparently, in the comic books, but he does not here. He has more idiosyncrasies than Cobra.
No.
He eats like jelly beans. I think they're jelly beans from a cocktail glass, right? He constantly listens to the Carpenters. He drinks coffee directly from the pot. He's just a mad lad, really.
Right.
He's off the leash. Well, we'll get to that anyway about him not being off the leash anyway. But given that I've got no real background with Ghost Rider, I couldn't get a handle on what the character is really about, because he seems to like revel in his power when he is on fire, sort of thing. And he rescues a woman from a mugger, but then he wakes up as if he's hungover. I'm not sure if he's fully conscious, and he seems to be regretful. So it's like I'm not sure of how conscious he is of what he's doing. It didn't seem clear to me. And Johnny Blaze himself, the guy when he's not a flaming skull, he is so kind of chilled in that kind of Nick Cage way, and morose really, because he's still mourning his father. He doesn't seem like any kind of a thrill seeker at all, despite his job. And yet he becomes this excitable maniac when he's Ghost Rider. So, and the film does nothing to explore those two opposing sides of his personality. So it didn't really make a lot of sense to me. It's obviously quite CGI heavy.
Bad CGI, or
it's just about passable, I would say. I think the problem isn't so much they do their best rendering fire, which we know is quite difficult to do in CGI. But I think the part of the problem is that the image of the flaming skull is inescapably silly in itself. So as soon as you take those images off the page and put them into this kind of grounded world, it will always look a bit ridiculous. So yeah, not the best. But anyway, you get the usual story beats. You get the kind of dead parents, him struggling with new powers, stumbling.
There has to be a love interest.
Yes, there is a love interest. So he's and it's played by Eva Mendes, and there's of course a scene where he's stumbling, trying to tell her the truth. There's all the unbelieving cops. There's the scenes of him gathering the different tools, the clothes, the vehicle, and naturally,
is there a child to use him as like a mentor, or
no?
Oh, okay.
Although he does have a mentor himself in the form of Sam Elliott. So that was a nice touch.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, I like that.
So because Sam Elliott plays like this original Ghost Rider who's like from the Western time, the Wild West times, if you see what I mean.
Good.
Yeah. So that was pretty cool. Yeah. The real problem is that the film is very tame and bloodless, and I don't just mean in terms of like the violence. I mean, it's clearly toned down in those terms, but also it's just very conventional in its plot, and the violence is mild. It's conventional in its plot. You get these kind of the occasional bit of second unit footage of some Gothic architecture, but it's not really built into the film or its themes. And then you got the main character, and obviously the main character is fairly bland, and Nicolas Cage is, shall we say, caged in this film. He's not off the leash in any way, sort of thing. I suppose the only time he is off the leash is when he's the CGI creation, and it's like, well, how much of that is really him, sort of thing. So that was very disappointing. And like even supposedly comical scenes really do fall flat. Wes Bentley and Peter Fonda are very boring in their delivery. Eva Mendes is terrible.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, there's two good supporting actors in the form of Sam Elliott, because he's always good, and Donal Logue, the guy who played Harvey Bullock in the Gotham TV series. He's good as well, and he's quite amusing. But the rest of it, I got the sense, I read up about it afterwards, and I realized that it spent a lot of time in development hell, this film. It was originally written in the year 2000, and this is 2007. So it was obviously, and I think what inevitably happens in those situations is that the script will be passed around from writer to writer, from studio to studio, and then inevitably it's going to become filmmaking by committee. And so it's like, and that's what it looks like on the screen. It's just like you got this pretty awesome looking character, and you just put them in the most conventional narrative you can imagine. Very disappointing.
When was the sequel made? It was only like, it must have been a year or two later.
Yeah, 2012, a little bit later.
Oh my God. Okay.
I don't think it did very well.
Yeah, I'm almost intrigued. Are you going to watch the sequel?
The fact that it's directed by the Crank people suggests that it might be a little bit crazier. I can't imagine that they do something as generic as the original. I don't know. I might do. Yeah, I'd like to see, Nick Cage just showing a bit more personality, really.
Because it must have done well enough for it to sort of warrant a sequel, and even maybe, hopefully it's a bit more outgoing. Have you ever seen Spawn?
No.
From like 1997. Please watch that film, please.
Has that got CGI in it?
Oh yeah, I'm pretty sure. I can't remember. I think it might be. Is it hang on, let me just check who plays the main. Hang on, it's 1997. It's got John Leguizamo in it.
Obviously.
So I'll be 2 moments. 2 shakes of a lamb's tail. Spawn movie. 1997. I'm pretty sure it was it? Yeah, Michael J. White plays Spawn. John Leguizamo. Martin Sheen's in it.
Probably playing the president.
The CG in that film is astonishing. And when he goes to hell, and I think again it's like Mephistopheles or someone in that, and like gives him his Spawn powers. The CG is so bad. I remember thinking, this is like watching a PlayStation 1 cutscene, like when it's kind of in low resolution and buffering on YouTube. It was baffling. So please watch it. Please.
I need to see that. That sounds amazing.
Considering
this was 10 years later, and some bits of this look pretty ropey.
Oh yeah, Spawn from 97. Give it a goosey.
Wow. Okay, so I've only got one left, and that is American Psycho 2. Which
this stars a woman.
It just does. It stars Mila Kunis.
Right. Okay.
So, the first thing to say is that this was never intended as an American Psycho sequel. So, bear that in mind.
Did they tell that to the person that titled the film?
I'm not sure that the person who wrote the film ever titled this film, and it certainly wouldn't have been American Psycho 2. Yeah. And you know, Mila Kunis has spoken about that, the fact that she wasn't aware at any point that this was going to be an American Psycho sequel. So you do get these weird moments where things are happening and Patrick Bateman's name will just be thrown into the mix. Usually you won't be able to see the person's lips moving, so you're thinking, this has been added in post, isn't it? Because really it's not that. There's no real connection. So Mila Kunis, so you see Mila Kunis' character as a little girl, little 12-year-old, and she's with her babysitter, and her babysitter is attacked by Patrick Bateman, and this little girl, as the babysitter is being attacked, the little girl goes and kills Patrick Bateman. Okay, so that's tied up that loose end. So yeah, so it's kind of got the same high ambition theme as, you know, like in American Psycho, it was all about investment bankers, wasn't it? But this is, so Mila Kunis is a college student, and so her whole thing is climbing over the kind of contenders in her class to become the professor's teaching assistant. Ultimately, she wants to become an FBI agent. Yeah, and William Shatner plays the professor naturally.
Oh, I think I'm going to say boyfriend then.
Oh, Jesus, no, he is really creepy in it though.
Really?
Yeah, he's quite good. Yeah. Anyway, it's got this. It's a very odd film. I don't think it's totally terrible, but it's got some really fundamental problems. Not least the music. It's got this incessant, jaunty music, kind of like Desperate Housewives or something, where it's like it's meant to complement the scene, but it's completely a complete juxtaposition with what's actually happening. And I get what they're going for, to have like this jaunty music while really harsh things happen and people get killed and stuff, because inevitably, like, what's going to happen is that she wants to, you know, get what she wants, and she's going to kill other students and that along the way, sort of thing. But the problem is it's just deployed in a really stupid, thoughtless way. So you'll have, so okay, I get it. So while someone's being killed, there might be some ironic music, but then there'll also be the same music over a scene where, you know, there's like police investigation going on, and it's like, this could be quite a tense, dramatic scene, but it's just like someone just, let's just play the same stupid, jaunty, plucked orchestral music over the top. So yes. Anyway, it feels like it was another decision that was made after it was decided this was going to be American Psycho sequel, because they were probably thinking, oh, well, you know, American Psycho, that was quite ironic, so, you know, why don't we have a bit of that? We'll add a bit of that afterwards. You can't retroactively add irony to something. But anyway,
Retroactive Quirk, my third album.
Mila Kunis is good, and she's well cast because she's obviously got like these massive, very innocent looking eyes, but she's sociopathic at the same time. So I think it's going for this kind of arch, off-kilter Heathers type vibe, but it's really not capturing it because the script isn't there. It doesn't have any of the American Psycho's dark satire, but then perhaps it wasn't really going for that anyway, because it was never intended to be that. So I do think that if it hadn't been lumbered with the American Psycho name, then it may have been better received, because it's not completely terrible. It's okay. The script isn't that much cop, but it is fairly unpredictable, and it is amusingly amoral at times, and the performances are pretty strong, especially Mila Kunis and William Shatner. So it's not a complete write-off, but you almost have to, you know, just ignore the moniker.
Fair enough. So, yeah, because when did this come out?
Not long after the original, 2002.
So Mila Kunis must have been young then.
Yeah, she was genuinely like probably 18 or 19, I guess.
Okay. Yeah, well, that's cool then. Billy Shatter's in it, so that's almost enough reason to watch it just on that basis alone.
I wouldn't say it's a good film exactly, but not as bad as you would imagine it would be.
Yeah, like especially when they've tacked on the American Psycho name. I have to read it, but did they have like another title? Because she must have signed on when it was called something
Oh
else.
yeah, yeah. And there's a scene. I only spotted one moment where someone actually says Patrick Bateman, and they're like, and we can see their face. So I actually rewound it to see if they were actually. It was William Shatner. And I was looking at his lips to see, did you actually say Patrick Bateman, or if they just post-dubbed that in? And I couldn't tell. But they must have done that a few times throughout the film, or just done like reshoots, or
Yeah, that's true.
added it in the post-dub.
So it's that time when we discuss the film of the week. I think I'm looking at mine as you were just rounding off your American Psycho 2 review. Then I was just looking at mine. I enjoyed The Call, and it's a tough one because I enjoyed Cold Skin. I enjoyed looking at it, but I spent too much of it frowning at what was happening. The Fanatic is, whilst it's fun, it's not film of the week material. It was just a nice surprise. Yeah. Triple Threat was pretty solid. I'm going to say, I'm not going to count In Fabric because I didn't watch it all, but I think that would be the film of the week. But I'm going to say The Call because that was like, I'm enjoying these 90-minute thrillers that are like pretty fast paced and stick to their premise at the moment. So I'm going to say The Call with Halle Berry from 2013, I think. So that's my film of the week.
Okay, well, I got some pretty strong ones this week as well.
You got Frankenstein.
It is not that. I mean, The Departed is very good, but I don't think it needs any more recommendations in a way, because I think it's pretty well regarded anyway, and it's and it's not a surprise that was a very good film because of the talent behind it. So I'm going to say Dirty Dancing because I'd never seen it before, and I've heard the songs, I've seen bits of it, and I was expecting the worst, but I was pleasantly surprised. I thought it was a really nice mid-budget just drama film, which worked really well, and I can understand why people worship it. I wouldn't go that far, but yeah, and it goes to show like how much of a loss Patrick Swayze was.
It's true because I mean, you're obviously not the target audience for that film, but I don't know if you realised that at any point. When you were listing like his performances that capture kind of machismo and manhood in Point Break, Roadhouse, I didn't realise how different they were, and I thought you realise I get the impression that even films like I mentioned earlier, like Tiger Warsaw and stuff, I can imagine he's never really bad in things, but the films are just bad around him sometimes.
Yes. Yeah. He was. I think he was probably quite limited in his range, but he did what he did very, very well. And so I think putting him, because he's got this innate masculinity, and you put him in a different type of movie, and it brings something different to the role, to the film. And he did have star quality, so. Yeah, so Dirty Dancing is my choice.
Dirty Dancing and The Call, good. Right then, I shall love you and leave you to watch. We've got quite a few films on the go. I've got one with Stephen McHattie and Elijah Wood to watch. I might watch In Fabric fully, but then I've got Us. I started last night, but it was clearly too late to start that film, so I'm going to watch that tonight. And I spotted another one with John Leguizamo and Ty Sheridan earlier on that looked interesting, so I might watch that as well. Any for you that are rolling up that you've got any love film DVDs come through the post?
I've got Out of Sight. Just started watching that, so finish that off tonight. The Steven Soderbergh film. Nothing else at the moment. My wife has asked me to recommend certain films because she's obviously off on maternity leave now. So, but specifically films made after 9/11, but set in New York.
Oh, okay.
The reason not before is because it's too sad. So, but she's like really into New York at the moment. So yeah, Answers on a Postcard, like modern films set in New York, which are really cool.
Well, like really brutal slashers, or
yeah, I was thinking that, Because actually, when I think of like New York films, I I think of like Woody Allen's Manhattan, or like like some 70s films, like cop thrillers and stuff, and like modern films that depict New York. I'm struggling a little bit.
I'll have a bit of a think. But yeah, that's quite a funky. That's a very niche thing to want to watch. I like that.
Yeah, it's
And
good. It's narrowed it down.
I'm actually looking for films set between Thursday, April the 5th, and then the following Tuesday in 1952 in Ystrad Gunlice. So if anyone can think of any films, or Blind Chachai, I'll watch films based. So if anyone can answers on a postcard, sticky back plastic, send those into us.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously we've got to wrap this up, so I won't reel off all my suggestions right now, but
just send me a text. Send me a text on my Philips mobile. They'll have to wait for it to scroll across because in a single line. But don't worry, the battery, I haven't charged it for 3 weeks. There's still 2 bars left.
Yeah.
Right then, I love you and I'll leave you.